Hey guys, Steve here. You are listening to one of our original 26 episodes. If you've listened to any of our new episodes, you're going to notice that we're sounding a little different in these ones.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
There is.
They've been remastered.
They have been remastered.
Because they had a really annoying hum.
Yeah, I mean, a huge thanks to listener James for doing almost all of the legwork on this thing.
Yeah.
You'll also notice if you had listened to what we're calling the Lost 26 episodes before, and you're re-listening now, the music and sound effects are gone.
Yes, we've gone back to straight audio. So be warned, we sound a little different today than we do in what you're about to listen to.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thinking sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways, the podcast. As distinct from Thinking Sideways, the movie, Thinking Sideways, the novel. This is the podcast. So I am joined by, on my right,
Devin.
And on my left, actually straight in front of me,
Steve.
Yeah. So, okay. So the gang's all here. And we're going to talk about something very mysterious, an unresolved mystery from the 1970s. It is, some of you may have even heard of this, the case of the Isdal woman. The Isdal woman was found dead in late November 1970 near a town called Bergen, Norway, in what's called the Isdalen Valley. The valley sort of tapers down towards this mountain called Mount Ulriken, which is to the northeast of Bergen. And on that side of the mountain is called the Valley of Death.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
I was going to say, I was waiting for the connection of like how Joe might have found this story.
Yeah, you've got a thing for the Death Mountain.
Yeah, I just go and type in Valley of Death, Mountain of Death, River of Death.
Lake of Death.
Yeah, Lake of Death,
yeah.
Creek of Death, Toilet of Death, and I always find something. So November 29th, on the foothills of Mount Ulriken, a man who's apparently a professor and his two daughters were hiking, and they came across the remains of a naked woman who'd been hidden among some rocks. She was partially burned. There were some empty bottles, plastic bottles, which smelled of gasoline nearby. Also a bottle of sleeping pills. So they, I don't know if they finished their hike or not. Presumably they walked back to town and got the police.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I would think so. And by the way, this place is called the Valley of Death because there's a lot of trails there, some of which apparently, according to a website I was reading about that was totally separate from this entire thing, some of the trails are not very well maintained. It's considered, and they're rather treacherous. So that's why it's called the Valley of Death, not because corpses are found up there all the time.
Okay.
So anyway, the police show up, and this winds up being the biggest criminal case at the Bergen police. It's not a huge town by any means.
And it's in the Netherlands, right?
And no, it's Norway.
Didn't you say? Oh, Norway.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah, Netherlands. It's all the same.
Same thing,
yeah,
really.
Same thing, really. Yeah. So anyway, I mentioned they found some plastic bottles reeking of gasoline, and they also found a partially burned passport, and again the sleeping pills. She also, and it turned out that upon the autopsy, that she had some of those pills in her.
So she had taken a couple of pills, presumably.
She had taken several of these things, yes. Some more interesting things. I mentioned the passport and the sleeping pills. And this is one of those dealios where I really, really would like to be able to see the actual police reports because, what I've been able to round up is kind of spotty. For example, the body was naked, right? Mm-hmm. So were there any clothes nearby? There's no mention made of that. So
was there burned up clothes
were there burned clothes
near her? Because you said she had been burned, correct? That's where
her body
the gasoline connection is?
Yeah, her body had been partially burned. Presumably, they don't say what parts were burned, but presumably it must have been her head. Mm-hmm. Because they weren't not able to take any photographs of her face, to show to people.
Because there was nothing recognizable.
Yeah, but apparently they were not able to get a photograph out of the passport that they found because that had apparently had been burned also. It's probably why it was burned. So anyway, they had a problem with how to identify this person. Her fingerprints had been sanded off. And
did you ever find, when I was looking through this, I could never find, were they sanded off prior to death, or had they been sanded off weeks in advance. I was never able to pin down, was this like done to her after she was killed?
Well, that's one of the little fragments of evidence that's in here leads me to believe it happened after she was killed. But there are people who are criminal types who don't want to leave fingerprints behind, and they do sand off their fingerprints. It's not totally uncommon. You can either use sandpaper or acid to get rid of those fingerprints. As far as when they were sanded off, later on they found some luggage. I'll get to that, but they found some pieces of glass in the luggage, and it had partial fingerprints on the glass. And police reportedly believed that those were her fingerprints, although they were never able to use those to identify her.
Oh, okay.
But if police believed that they were her fingerprints, then that makes me believe that somebody must have sanded off her fingers after they murdered her.
That would make sense.
Yeah. So, but again, I'm not 100% sure. And again, like as with all of these things, little stray factoids that aren't really actually true manage to get worked into the story by other people.
Yeah.
And so as far as the pieces of glass with the fingerprints, I don't know if that's true or not. Who knows if any of this is true? Who knows if Norway even exists? It might be a big old hoax. I've never seen it. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, as I said, they did an autopsy on her. She had suffered blunt force trauma to the neck. And this was apparently the cause of death, or if not the cause of death, then certainly a contributor to it. Then again, they discovered several sleeping pills in her system. They looked at her teeth, and they tried to find her using her dental records, and that came back nil. They were not able to identify her that way. There was evidence that she had some dental work done in Latin America.
Wait, how?
Yeah, how?
How do you know that?
Can you tell?
This is again something I know that like certain things, like for example, if you get dental work done in Russia, it's kind of obvious apparently because it's kind of crude, and it might be and I was not able to find out how they knew it was anything to do with Latin America, unless customarily in Latin America perhaps they use different materials for fillings
or techniques, maybe.
Or different techniques. Yeah, so I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that was one of those things.
Yeah,
I questioned how did you make that connection, because it's not stated anywhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, enough of the dental work. I'm going to skip ahead to the ending. They eventually wound up concluding that she committed suicide.
What?
Now this is somewhat controversial, but let me get back to their investigation. Though they were asking around all the people. She stayed at several hotels. She had actually come and gone to the town of Bergen several times, and meanwhile gone off and traveled around Europe a little bit, and returning. And while she was there, she tended to change hotels often, and sometimes within hotels she would change rooms. So interesting behavior. So
that's a little odd.
Yeah, so the police asked around at all the hotels. They got descriptions from people. I mean, based on the bone structure they were able to see in her face from the autopsy and everything, and pairing that up with police sketch artists and descriptions that hotel employees gave them, various other people, they were able to put together a composite sketch of this person and show that around to people. They continued with their investigation. Eventually, it led them to the train station in Bergen, where they found in a locker, they found 2 suitcases that belonged to this woman. Yeah, I know. Oh.
This sounds so okay.
Sounds so much like Tom and
Trude.
I know. Do you think they might have been related?
Maybe.
Yeah. All right.
Or was his girlfriend?
She was the murderer.
Yeah. It's something shrewd, but anyway, I haven't checked. Actually, I need to get a globe out and find out if this town in Norway is exactly on the opposite side of the earth from Adelaide. It was Adelaide, Australia, where he was found, right? Yeah. So anyway, they find these suitcases, major find, but then they find, to their chagrin, that the labels had all been removed from all the clothing.
What?
Yeah, I know. No labels. They found a bottle of lotion, which was apparently prescription only, but the label had been peeled off. And in the lining of one suitcase, they discovered 500 German marks had been sewn in.
With orange thread of a weird type? Or?
Yeah.
We don't know that part.
So they found a few pieces of broken glass. Why you keep broken glass in your suitcase is kind of beyond me. But they found, these are the ones I mentioned earlier, they found partial fingerprints on those pieces of glass, which they believed to be hers, but they were not able to use those to identify her. Again, this leads me to believe that her fingerprints must have been sanded off the scene of the crime. Although, maybe they ran out of gasoline. Do you think they could pour gas on her hands and just light them on fire? It'd be a lot easier than sanding her hands.
This is obviously a murder and the suicide theory that came up by the police. I mean, I'm going to discount that right away because I don't take sleeping pills and then throw myself onto a rock and bang my head and then light myself on fire. This just doesn't.
Gasoline,
while I'm naked, this just doesn't make sense. So I could see if somebody botched burning the body, then they would go for, okay, what else can I do? Well, sanding the fingerprints off seems like a hard way to do it rather than, and I'm sorry, this is gruesome,
chopping the hands off.
Yeah,
that's true.
That would be an easier way to take care of the problem. But then again, you got to get rid of the hand.
Yeah, maybe they forgot to bring their hatchet.
Maybe.
Yeah. But luckily they thought to bring their sandpaper. It could very well be. What a lot of people don't realize about human bodies is that they're almost all water, and then actually burning a human body is a lot harder than it seems.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, and so they probably had a couple of bottles of gas. They threw them on there, and then she just didn't, go up in flames like they had hoped. And so, unfortunately, they had no gas left over to torch her hands with. One of them had to go back to town to the hardware store and get some sandpaper.
Okay, all right, this is weird. Okay, continue on.
Anyway, so on the basis of all the various witnesses who had met this woman, they were, like I said, able to put together a composite sketch, and they were published in the local papers, and they were also disseminated across Europe via Interpol. And they were able to actually put together quite a bit of her travel itinerary between Interpol and between various inquiries that police made, and also they found a diary that had some coded references to which they broke. And I know.
They broke it.
They broke the code, not the diary. So they were able to decipher some of this and sort of figure out her travel itinerary. They found out that she had traveled around Norway and across Europe with 8 or 9 different identities, different names that she gave.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a lot of names to keep straight.
Yeah, it seriously is. And according to some reports, in the luggage they found a bunch of different passports from different countries, all different names. I'm kind of discounting that because if they had found the passports, they would have had photos of her and they wouldn't have needed to put together a composite sketch.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So I hadn't even made that connection. That's a great point.
Yeah, so they discovered all these different names that she had signed into hotels using and stuff like that by using again police inquiries in her diary. So she went to, she was in March 1970. She was in Norway, stayed in Oslo, went to Bergen, stayed at the Hotel Bristol under 2 different names. In Oslo, she used Genevieve Lancier, and then she was Claudia Tilt in Bergen, and then moves to the Hotel Scandia, same name. And then winds up leaving Bergen and traveling eventually to Germany, stays there for months, and then eventually got back to Oslo in early October. After staying there for a brief amount of time, she wound up going to Paris, stayed at a couple of different hotels in Paris, and then eventually made her way back to Bergen, Norway, and got there at the end of October, where she stayed at yet another hotel under yet another name, and then left Bergen, and then wound up coming back and staying in a hotel under yet another name. While she was in Oslo, she stayed in a hotel under the name Very Jarl. She gets to Stavanger. She stays at a hotel called Fenella Lorch. Eventually gets back to Bergen, stays at the Hotel Rosenkrantz using the name Elizabeth Lienhauer.
She had a lot of names.
So on the morning of November 23rd, she left the hotel. She signed up, paid in cash, and asked for a taxi. She apparently went to the railway station, which is where when she dropped off her 2 pieces of luggage, and that was the last anybody saw of her alive. Her body was found 6 days later. So back to her many names. She also used wigs. They found wigs in the luggage, and some of the people at the hotel said they had seen her wearing various wigs. According to some accounts in the luggage, they also found eyeglasses, non-prescription, probably used just for altering her appearance. Yeah, and again the diary with the cryptic entries. Witnesses said also that she had spoken several languages: French, German, English, and Dutch. She, as I said, stayed in many hotels and often changed rooms. She usually, in signing in, would indicate that she was a traveling saleswoman and an antiquities collector, which is suspicious. Well, not really, but yeah, they described her as 30.
Those antiquities dealers,
I
they're
know.
an odd bunch.
Well, that seems to be the standard cover for spies. Antiquities.
Really?
Oh yeah, don't you watch movies?
No.
Okay, so anyway, according to the staff at the hotels, she was described as 30, 40 years old, attractive, about 5'4", 5'5", with wide hips, small eyes, and that's about it. They said that she seemed to be kind of on her guard and stayed in her room a lot. They took the clothing in the suitcases, which of course didn't have any labels in it, but they showed it to some clothing retailers, and all they were able to say is that it appeared to be Italian clothing. So apparently she had a taste for Italian clothes.
Huh.
There was a connection she'd been witnessed hanging out with apparently an Italian photographer whose name eludes me at the moment. But anyway, this photographer supposedly had given her a lift, according to some accounts, had dinner with her. One other account said she spent the night with him. And so, again, some of those funny little factoids that work their way in to the story. So anyway, the police interviewed him. He said that the woman said she came from a small town north of Johannesburg, South Africa. And
That's a hard accent to fake.
Mm-hmm.
That would be.
A South African accent is a hard one to fake.
Yeah.
But I swear when I was reading on this that people said she had a quote-unquote unplaceable accent. Mm-hmm. If she was fluent, what was it, 3, 4, 5 languages,
like
something like that?
German, French, Flemish, and Dutch, I think.
Yeah, so she had a lot of languages under her belt, which will mute out an accent on its own.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that might be why they said, I can't place this accent, because if that's where we're presuming that she was telling the truth, or this guy is telling the truth. Mm-hmm. If that's where she came from, then she learns all these other languages. She's going to water down that accent, just unintentionally or intentionally. Yeah. And nobody's going to know what she sounds like. Yeah.
Well, it's also quite possible this is Northern Europe, too, and an Afrikaans accent is probably an unusual one that most people wouldn't recognize, as opposed to, say, a German, French accent, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Very true. That could be another possibility. Anyway, besides the Italians saying that she was from near Johannesburg, she told him that she had 6 months to hang out in Norway and didn't elaborate on that anymore. And so that's about all he knew. So that was kind of a dead end. So when she checked out of her room, she paid in cash, as I said, and was never seen again alive. And the only other part of the story, well, there's a couple of other parts. Supposedly, 32 years after the fact, a local 26-year-old man, 26 years old at the time, was hiking around in the same area with some friends. And I'm kind of discounting this because, the guy waits 32 years to come forward. It's like,
That's questionable. You're right.
Yeah, but I'm going to go ahead and tell this story anyway. So on 24th of November, that would be the day after she checked out of the hotel, this guy was hiking with friends in that area and supposedly came across a woman of foreign appearance who was her face was distorted by fear, he said. He said that she was dressed elegantly and very inappropriately for hiking. So, and that seemed a little bit mysterious to him. And
what does elegantly mean?
Probably like an evening
like
gown?
A formal gown or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking at least a dress, if nothing else, maybe not a, big poofy prom dress, but just
Probably
dress
a
in
dress,
general.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, so he sees her. She looks very scared, and is dressed in formal wear. And they pass each other, and she said she moves her mouth as if she was going to say something, but then decided apparently not to. And also, she was being followed by 2 black-coated men who also looked foreign.
Huh.
Yeah, I know.
Did he report that to the police?
Not until after the body was discovered. And this is the thing that I find kind of incredible about it. And said, so this is a young guy, 26 years old, with friends. She's all by herself being followed by some guys that are going to murder her. Why doesn't she just say, hey guys, I'm going to hike with you. Is that okay? Seriously? Wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
I sure as hell would. That's another reason I don't really buy this story. But apparently after he heard about the murder, he contacted the police and he recognized her from the composite drawings he saw in the newspaper. But he said that the policeman that he spoke to basically said, quote, forget her, she was dispatched. The case will never be solved. And so he basically took that advice and forgot about it. and then 32 years later apparently decided to come forward about it. Yeah, I know, it's a little fishy, so I'm not really buying this.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd throw it in there because it's just part of the legend.
That sounds hinky to me.
Yeah, there was a Norwegian television network did a little story on it in 2002. According to them, Special Branch, which is apparently Norwegian intelligence, was involved in this case, they claim. And that might be when this guy came forward, because 2002, that's about 32 years after the case. So he might have been part of it. The story, I didn't see the television story about it. I just read about it in the papers, and I didn't see any mention of this guy in the newspaper articles. But according to this, Special Branch was involved, and even though apparently the police were following some promising leads, Special Branch basically told them to cut off the investigation and just label it suicide. So this is what they said.
Oh, so what they're saying is basically they were told what the answer was and just to let it be.
Yeah, basically not to follow it any further.
Although I guess that, goes along with that young man's story, right? I mean, I guess there are some circumstances in which you don't speak up. Like, maybe those guys behind her had guns and she knew it and she didn't want to.
Involve an innocent.
Not just that, but involve a lot of innocence, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to save her life; it's just going to get other people killed.
That's true. Very
if that's
noble.
the case,
Great. That was very noble of her. But but another thing I find incredible about his story is that the cop would say something like, forget her, the case will never be solved. If the cop was truly being warned off by Special Branch, wouldn't he say something like, well, thanks for the info, sir, I'll put it in the file. You're not going to say something as blunt
but if the guy comes forward and he tells somebody, and then they keep acting as if they've got no other information, and he pipes up again, and he says, well, I talked to, Officer Kowalski over there, and he took my statement, and then Kowalski said, it makes this, it just snowballs on itself.
Yeah, possibly. Although, Kowalski could just say, look, the guy said she was being followed by two foreign-looking men in black coats. So what was I supposed to do? Put it on an APB on foreign-looking guys in black coats?
Okay.
Yeah,
it's kind of a vague little story.
You and your logic.
Yeah. So anyway, it is a big imponderable mystery, and I've decided that what we need to do is one of us needs to learn Norwegian. And another one of us needs to get a second job to save up the money so we can fly to Norway and read the police files.
Why don't we just make a time machine?
Yeah, there we go.
That would be easier. Okay, Joe. So we've got this account of what happened to this woman. And this is one of those stories, as you mentioned, where things work their way into the story and it changes.
Often, yeah.
I came across completely different accounts of this story. I don't know if you did.
Well, yeah, I forgot to mention that there was another account where she wasn't found on the mountain at all. She was found in a hotel room with her body stuffed in a fireplace, partially burned.
Right, and they found, and in that version, they say they found not the 9 passports.
The 9
for
passports,
her.
yeah.
And it was not only the 500 German francs, is that correct?
Marks,
but they also found local currency, I think it was. So it was, the details were the same, but then there was odd things injected into it. There was a monogrammed silver spoon, but the monogram had been carved off.
Yeah,
and then when they found spoons in her suitcase.
In her luggage, when they found her, exactly. And
that one, I admit right now, this version that I'm talking about sounds like the fanciful version that got spun off, but it still makes me question the original version that we're talking about and the details that we're finding in it.
Although I got the spoon thing I found especially kind of laughable, because if you buy a spoon, you've already cut the labels out of your luggage, so you buy a spoon with a monogram on it, and then you file it off. Why don't you just buy a spoon that doesn't have a monogram on it?
Yeah, just go to IKEA.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
Get a plain spoon.
Yeah.
I know how ignorant that makes me sound, but it didn't make sense. I know they don't have IKEA at that time, but it's really weird.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, although the spoon thing, the only explanation I can think of for that is that she was a bit of a klepto, and maybe she had a policy of nabbing a spoon from every hotel she stayed at.
Yeah, that's possible.
There's people that do that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but I found, I did run across that, and I was going to mention that. So I would thank you for bringing it up because I had spaced it off. But yeah, as far as, being found stuffed in a fireplace in a hotel room, I don't know. Most hotel rooms, number one, don't have fireplaces.
Actually, I mean, this is 70 is when this happened, 1970? And we're in Norway, which is kind of cold. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if hotel rooms had fireplaces. I mean, I've stayed in hotels in the States that have fireplaces.
Oh, it does happen,
I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. But yeah, so.
Were there accounts of her every time she checked into a hotel asking for a room with a balcony?
Yeah, well, there was at one point, she didn't always do that, but at one point, apparently, when she was staying at, I don't remember which hotel it was, she asked to change rooms because she wanted a room with a balcony. That just might have been a way to change, to get a room change without arousing suspicion.
I guess that's fair.
So that's probably what that was about.
And then somebody said they heard her talking to a man in her room.
A man across the hallway, and she said something to him in German.
Yeah.
Like, I'm coming, or something like that. Yeah, again, that doesn't,
there's so many, tiny little weird details.
Tiny little things that don't really shed any light on anything, which is why I didn't mention her talking to the guy.
Yeah, I just think they're interesting because, we're just talking about how it's hard to tell what's true and what's not true in this story. So, I think adding like any little detail we can, who knows what's the real one and what's not the real one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. That's the beauty of this kind of stuff. It gets people all fired up, and people start fictionalizing it. And next thing you know, it's all polluted.
Yep.
And it's hard to say what's real or not. But it's interesting, though, that the Norwegian media has gotten sort of involved with it. And actually, in one of the articles that I read, they actually questioned somebody from Special Branch, and who basically said they wouldn't comment on it. So that was about it.
Plausible deniability, or just maybe they didn't know anything?
Yeah, it's entirely possible that they just, weren't involved and knew nothing about it.
I don't know. I feel like it's so much easier in cases like that. If they don't have anything to hide, then just don't have anything to hide.
It's 30 years later.
And say, no, we weren't involved.
Yep.
Sorry.
We know nothing about it. Yeah.
I can't comment on that.
So what theories, Joe, do you have on this? I mean, what the heck is going on here?
I'm at a little bit of a loss. I know that there's some talk about her possibly being a spy, but I'm not.
Shocking.
I know. Yeah, I know. But the thing about it is, and it's entirely possible she was a spy, but spies don't do suspicious things like sanding off their fingerprints. Although, again, if they were sanded off after her death, then that might explain that.
They don't? That seems like the sort of thing a spy would do.
No, that would attract attention at borders and stuff like that.
Oh, all right. That's fair.
That would look suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're supposed to, when you're a spy, you're supposed to just never attract attention to begin with.
That's fair.
Well, in the spy theory, what you and I had talked about this before. There's a book that's in Norwegian about this, and what the heck is the name of it?
It's Operation Isotope. Unfortunately, it's in Norwegian. It has never been translated to English, as far as I know, anyway. And so, there was talk about her, like attempting to buy radioactive materials, and
hey, that sounds familiar too.
Yeah, I know. Where the evidence for this, came from, I don't know.
Oh my God!
I can't read the book. I don't know Norwegian.
I have a new theory.
You do? Okay, let's hear it.
Remember our Rio de Janeiro lead masks case?
The lead mask, yeah.
They were the foreign-looking men in black coats.
That could have been it.
I think the time frame is a little.
They
off.
Time traveled.
Oh, that's right. They time traveled.
They
time traveled over there. That's why she looks so freaked out, right? Because they just appeared out of nowhere.
Got it.
Started following her, and they said, "We need the radioactive material," and she said, I don't have radioactive material. What are you talking about?
I'm not the radioactive material you're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they got mad and killed her, and then killed themselves.
What other theories have we got on this?
I mean, she could have been. I could see where possibly she could have been maybe a courier for, say, a crime network, that kind of thing.
Or a drug cartel or something funny like that.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
That would be an easy way to transport drugs across borders if it's your quote unquote, these are antiquities and look at these old vases that I have.
Yeah.
And then they're just crammed full of whatever drug it may be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
That would make total sense.
Yeah.
Because the procedures for checking stuff were obviously not as stringent as they are now.
Oh yeah. So they probably would have been fairly easy to do that kind of thing. She could have been smuggling secrets, radioactive materials, who knows what. But although smuggling radioactive materials that sounds like kind of an unhealthy thing to do.
Yeah, that's
probably
not a
not.
long-term solution.
Yeah.
Not a good career choice.
Yeah, there's other possibilities. Another one is that she was just kind of an itinerant, heiress type of person who had enough spare cash laying around to travel around in Europe, and she just ran across the wrong person and was murdered for some entirely random reason. That kind of stuff happens too.
Oh, stepped on somebody's toes, basically, or made the wrong person mad.
Made the wrong person mad, or just happened to make friends with the guy who turned out to be a serial killer.
Oh.
That kind of thing.
Okay, I hadn't thought about that one.
Yeah.
I don't like that one either.
Yeah, no,
that's weird.
Yeah. There's not a lot of hints or clues that really point us anywhere. That's why again one of us needs to learn Norwegian, so they can read that book, and the other one of you needs to learn Norwegian so you can read the police files. And then we'll shed a little light on this whole
There we
thing.
go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect.
But this case actually did attract the attention of no less august an organization than Cracked. And they actually wrote a little thing on it. They were mainly focusing on the bungling of the investigation by the police, especially they were a little incredulous about the whole finding of suicide. Although, if you believe these reports that came out in that 2002 report, and Special Branch actually did get involved and basically told them to back away and declare a suicide. Well, maybe they're not bunglers. They were just, told to declare it a suicide. Although even at that doesn't make any sense, because when you think about it, it would have made a lot more sense to tell them to declare it to be a murder, an unsolved murder, because those things do happen fairly frequently.
But unsolved murders would have a higher probability of being reopened in the future.
Oh yeah.
Whereas in a suicide, well, it's a suicide. We don't go back and look at cold suicides because we know what happened.
Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, given the facts of the case, it's going to arouse a little bit of suspicion. If somebody strips naked and files their fingertips off, douses themselves with gasoline, and then bashes themselves in the back of the neck while lighting themselves on fire and eating sleeping pills, I forgot about that. That looks like a kind of a clumsy way to commit suicide.
It's a heck of a juggling act.
Yeah. It's
Additionally, her clothes would be there.
You would think. Well, she might have stripped them off and just run naked around for a while. She's like, I'm going to die. I might as well run naked in the wild for a while.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Wait, it was February?
It was November in Norway.
Yeah,
that's risk day.
Yeah.
It could have been that she was running around naked and she started freezing to death. And what was that? You remember the Yatlov case? So I forget what that condition is called now.
Hypothermia?
Well, it's hypothermia, but the actual mental condition that develops from hypothermia.
Oh, where you think you're warm.
You think you're warm. Yeah, exactly. So maybe she was running around naked and started thinking that she was really cold, and then decided, hey, I've got some gasoline here. I'll warm myself up with a little gas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
This is not holding water.
I was willing to say it was like an accidental suicide before I read about the burning situation, right? Because all right, somebody takes a bunch of sleeping pills and goes a little crazy, takes all their clothes off and slips and falls. Sure.
Yeah.
And then douses themselves in gasoline and
yeah.
Although I guess only plausible scenario I have here is somebody takes sleeping pills and they're going to commit suicide by dousing themselves in fire for whatever reason. That's the method they've chosen. All right, fine. So they take sleeping pills because they think it'll hurt less, or they'll just fall asleep and then burn to death, or whatever. Set themselves on fire, slip, fall. Kill themselves on accident. But it seems like there would be more burning, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, it's still not working.
Yeah.
Still not working.
Yeah.
Those are the two places I can get.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's puzzling. Well, another theory is that, that I made up just now, she decided to take the sleeping pills and also drink some gasoline, and then And then just because the gasoline would kill her on top of the sleeping pills, and then she decided to smoke one last cigarette and lit herself on fire. And I know. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is the first of a mystery that we have not actually solved.
Yeah?
Yeah, I know.
Not a first, but...
Kind of a disappointment.
Yeah.
It's a first in Joe's mind.
True, okay.
He always solves them.
Yeah,
That's true.
always.
Joe has the answer.
Yeah.
We just are never on board.
Yeah. Well, what about the chupacabra? Did I mention the chupacabra? Yeah. Okay, so, she was being followed by two foreign-looking, dark-clothed chupacabras.
Anyway.
Okay, well, anyway, so there we go. Mystery solved, the chupacabra, once again. That's the end of our episode. I know it makes you sad. It makes me sad, too. If you want to contact us, if you have any information about this case, and I'm sure one of you does, there's somebody out there probably with special branch who participated in this cover-up. We want to hear from you. Contact us at thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. Find us on Facebook, and, of course, find us on iTunes. And while you're out on iTunes, grabbing episodes left and right, be sure to leave us a rating. We like those ratings, and make sure it's a good rating. And also, leaving comments is also much appreciated.
Yeah, we always love to hear from folks.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, we do like to hear from you folks. Oh, yeah, and also, by the way, don't let me forget Stitcher. Find us on Stitcher. So there's so many ways to find us.
We're all over the place.
We're super accessible.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for this week, folks. So long. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.